Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
I'm going to ask you guys to have a somewhat mid-service stretch. So I'll ask you to raise your right hand if you've ever been through a crucifixion experience where you've had pain, trial, struggle, breakup, a flooded house, suffering, sadness, okay? That's not, and you go, oh, okay, see more hands come up. All right, great, keep that right hand up. Now raise your left hand if you've had a resurrection experience. If you come through that experience, if your faith has brought you through, if God showed up for you in a great way. So keep your hands up if this has happened to you more than once in your life, where you've had over and over and over again. Okay, take a look around. So this is our common experience. Thank you, you can put your hands down. So my purpose for that is that tonight I'm talking about the Great Demonstration, which is chapter 16 in Eric Butterworth's Discover the Power Within You book. So this is the last talk in our Wednesday night series for Adventures in Faith. And we are going to look at how Jesus demonstrated self-mastery and how resurrection is a spiritual principle. And so we practice this throughout our lives, yes? Yes, we experience crucifixion, we experience resurrection. So if you take one thing home with you tonight, it's to remember that whatever experience you're going through, no matter how difficult, painful, long, enduring, that there is always a gift and a resurrection and a blessing. Now, Jesus was called Master Teacher. They called him Master, and this was long before his resurrection. Right? It wasn't due to the resurrection. It wasn't due to the events of his birth. It was due to how he showed up in life, that he showed up as a master, that he expressed and demonstrated spiritual principle every day throughout his life. And this is explained, Eric Butterworth tells us in Hebrews 4:15, which says, Jesus was a man, one that hath been in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. And so how we understand sin in Unity is just missing the mark, and that's how it was originally meant, missing the mark. And so my understanding of that phrase in Hebrews and the way that I'm understanding it through Eric Butterworth's teaching is that Jesus had his crucifixion experiences, he had his trials, he had his rough times, but he didn't miss the mark, meaning he learned the lesson. He grew, he mastered it, he responded from his own Christ nature. And that's what people saw. He was responding from his Christ nature, not from his limited ego, less than understanding. So this is a talk about Easter. It's November, but we're talking about Easter because that's where we are in the book. And this was Jesus's greatest demonstration of his mastery of life and death. So we know he was crucified, right? And on the third day, he rose again. So I think our resurrection experiences are going to be a little different, right? Because the odds of any of us being crucified in this day are pretty low, right? Actually on a cross. So we all have our own resurrection in our own way. And so I wanted to share with you a funny resurrection story that I heard. And it's about a man who was on the verge of dying, an elderly man, and he was on his deathbed, just breathing his last breaths. And then he smelled something so amazing. He had to go find out what it was. He had to, because it smelled to him like his favorite thing in the whole wide world was your homemade chocolate chip cookies. So he got up, homemade chocolate chip cookies, right? That's enough to bring you back to life. So he drew up as much strength as he possibly could in his body, and he threw his legs over the side of the bed, leaned up against the wall, dragged himself over to the stairs, got one step at a time, breathing very heavily. Now this took all the strength that he had, got himself down the stairs. And he sees in the distance, not one, not two, but a whole table of hundreds of chocolate chip cookies, his favorite. And he thought, am I in heaven? Did I die? Did I go to heaven? Or is this my wife's last gift to me, just to send me off into the next experience of my soul with a blessing, right? So he said, all right, I have to have one. So he's trying to get to the table, and he ends up on the floor, crawling, dragging himself with his last ounce of energy, throws his hand up on the table and is able to get a cookie. And he tastes it. And boy, oh boy, this is the best chocolate chip cookie he has ever had. And this is so good, he's eating it. And it's like it renews him. And he gets this extra surge of energy, of life. He has this desire to go on. He's starting to feel good. And so he says, I need to have another cookie. So he grabs another cookie, and he feels this pain. So where's this pain coming from? He looks up and he sees his wife's spatula, which just hit him. And she says to him, don't touch those cookies. Those are for your funeral. So your resurrection might not be expected by the others in your life. They might not like it. They might not like it. It might not be what they had planned for you. But we know that it is spiritual principle to resurrect. We do it anyway, right? We do it anyway. So the reason that we celebrate Jesus' resurrection every year in Easter is not just because, wow, it was pretty amazing that he did that, right? Which is something good to know and to celebrate. It's because it continues to have relevance and meaning for us on our spiritual path. And so Eric Butterworth talks about in the book how the resurrection, the stone being rolled away from the tomb and the tomb being empty, that it can seem otherworldly, it can seem like a great mystery and hard to explain. But it's powerful for us when we recognize it's a demonstration for this world and not for something beyond our three-dimensional experience. Eric Butterworth said, Easter is not just a day when we recall how Jesus rose from the dead. It is a time to take a new look at ourselves and contemplate the divinity in us, the depths of our own innate God potential. It is a time to reappraise the principle that makes all overcoming possible. So when we go within, we contemplate the depths, we become miners for a heart of gold, perhaps. Thank you, Bruce and Brian Ross, for performing a Heart of Gold Neil Young song I had requested. It's one of those songs, you listen to the song and think about, it has a mood and energy, a longing to it, a calling. That here's Neil Young, and he's searching for something beyond what he's experienced. And so on first blush, it seems like, well, he's looking for the love of his life. He's looking for his soulmate. He's just searching for a woman with a heart of gold, And then look at the lyrics and listen to it more deeply. I've come into a different understanding, a deeper, more spiritual understanding of what the lyrics actually say. It speaks to me as a spiritual song. The beautiful thing about art is that you can interpret it however you want. And so I hear it, and I want to share with you my interpretation of this song. I looked at the Revealing Word because I wanted to know what the Revealing Word, which is our Unity dictionary for spiritual terms, and what it says about heart of gold. Heart of gold. So it has heart and it has gold in it. And it says that heart represents spiritual gifts, the riches of spiritual consciousness, or the riches of spirit, the consciousness of divine substance. So that's the gold. The heart is love. It's the faculty through which man receives love from being, from spirit, right? The heart is the visible expression of the invisible center of consciousness, the invisible center of love. Heart is the visible form of it. It's the center from which divine substance is poured forth, and we use it when we send forth a loving thought. So heart of gold, meaning our spiritual consciousness revealed through the heart, through love. And then there was another definition in there that I also thought was interesting, that it said that when the heart is mentioned in Scripture that the heart represents the subconscious mind. So I thought this was interesting to be on a search for a heart of gold, that what Jesus showed and mastered and demonstrated in his life was the subconscious, which is our storehouse of memories and experiences, right? That's the filter through which our spiritual consciousness comes through into our conscious mind, right, through those filters. And to have a heart of gold, in my metaphysical understanding of it, is to have a subconscious mind that is filled with God's substance. So you've transformed those limited, ego-based, lack, suffering, weak thinking with God thoughts. So that is that metaphysical heart of gold, where the subconscious mind has been transformed and reveals only God's substance. Okay? So one, we won't find the heart of gold outside. That's what the song kind of tells you, that Neil Young went around. He said, I've been to Hollywood, I've been to Redwood, I crossed the ocean for a heart of gold. He looked all over the world for this deeper knowing, didn't find it in Hollywood in fame and being loved by many, many people, not found there. So it's not outside of ourselves. So we take the journey within. He says, I want to live, I want to give. I've been a miner for a heart of gold. That mining is really going deep into our own realization of being. He says, it's these expressions I never give that keep me searching for a heart of gold. So he's saying, I don't give these out into the world, which is why I haven't found heart of gold. Living, giving, being kind and generous. That's the meaning, the real meaning of somebody says, oh, you have a heart of gold. That you look in the dictionary and it says it means it's a person's kind and generous, loving, right? A good person. Gold. Another thing that's interesting about gold is that it's an element that's basically indestructible. I mean, you can, I think if there's some kind of contact with nuclear substance that it can change form or something, but basically it's indestructible. So we're talking about spirit. We're talking about that of you that cannot be destroyed, it cannot be changed. It is that which continues beyond this physical form. And we have to find that within ourselves. We're not going to find it out in the world, no matter how many great spiritual teachers we listen to, no matter how many books we read. It's something that we must discover within ourselves. Remember, Jesus said, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. And I believe that what he was saying there, because obviously he was a pretty good guy, right? Is he's saying good with a capital G, the good that God is. He knew he was human and his humanity had certain limitations, but that ultimate good, that unlimited, infinite good, that is God. That is of God, and that we can only find by going within. We must go to God. And so to become a miner of a heart of gold means to look within yourself. The wholeness that you seek. We tend to seek wholeness from others. We look for others to kind of fill in the gaps, meet our needs, and that perhaps we go out with our begging bowl looking for love in all the wrong places. You know, you know that one? That you must begin with discovering love within yourself, which is loving yourself, coming into a compassion and a kindness toward yourself. And that's what I feel like this journey that we see, and how Jesus knows his worth, his value, and his own love. And that is how he's able to know that for others. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. You are the light of the world. He knew it for himself first. He knew the love of himself. So that's part of it, is knowing your own love. To fully receive the love of God begins with your own self-love. It's something that I keep working on myself, part of my own self-mastery. We're all working on that and coming into a greater awareness of that. So we know Jesus was the greatest miner of a heart of gold. He knew the truth of his divinity. Do you remember when Jesus was baptized in Scripture? It says that Spirit said to him, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." right? Do you remember what happened right after that? Anybody? Yeah? The dove descended, okay. So Spirit said, "You're my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." And then where did Jesus go after that? His baptism. Do you know? Karen knows. He went into the wilderness, right? Yes. So everything, we understand it metaphysically as Jesus, the temptation by the devil is all the ego thoughts. So anything unlike "you are God's beloved Son in whom, God is well pleased" comes up to be healed and revealed and all that. So remembering that this process of uncovering what's in the subconscious mind, the self-mastery process, is what we're talking about. In Unity, we use denials and affirmations. That's our prayer process in order to shift the subconscious thinking so that the truth can be more revealed and expressed in our conscious mind. So whenever the master teacher faced a limiting belief, he knew the truth. And that's what that story of him in the wilderness demonstrated, that he always brought the truth. He didn't try to demonstrate anything less than the truth of what he was. And this takes practice. It takes practice, right? That's why we come together in community, to support each other in knowing that truth. Eric Butterworth talks about practice in the chapter. He tells a story of the great pianist, Paderewski, who gave a command performance for the royal family in Europe. And a duchess was so excited by the performance. She loved it, and she went up to him and she said, "Maestro, you are a great genius." And he replied, "Ah, yes, but before I was a genius, I was a clod." I was a clod. So we're all a work in progress, right? We're all a work in progress, so we want to be patient with ourselves. Eric Butterworth said that when Jesus was called the Christ, he could have replied, "Ah, yes, but before I demonstrated mastery, I was a humble carpenter in Nazareth." Jesus' demonstration is repeatable. It's important for us to remember that it wasn't just a one-time thing a couple thousand years ago. It's repeatable, and we're able to demonstrate it in our own lives. And we know this, that Jesus taught this, because in John he said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me," and Eric Butterworth tells us that this is the Christ indwelling, "the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works shall he do, because I go unto the Father." And he says, Eric Butterworth says, "Because I have made the breakthrough and have proved the divinity of man, so you will do greater." So like the heart of gold, Jesus proved that the resurrection, through the resurrection, that the life of God is indestructible, it's eternal, it is changeless, but not just for him, for all of us. So this is the resurrection principle. It is the key to self-mastery, to know this and to practice this, knowing that you could rise above any dark hour, any limitation, to a new beginning. But it doesn't mean that the experience won't leave a scar. It may. It may leave a scar. If you know the story in Genesis chapter 32, yes, of when Jacob wrestled with the man. He wrestled with the man, and the man said, "Let me go." And he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And so he did. He did bless Jacob, and he gave him the name Israel. But he didn't leave without a scar. The wrestling had knocked his hip out of joint, and Jacob went on to have a limp. He had a limp, and he resurrected. He overcame that experience. So we can resurrect. Life can bring us great difficulties. We will resurrect, but that doesn't mean that when we're reminded of the experience, we might not cry, or it might not still be difficult to talk about. That doesn't mean we haven't resurrected and healed and found our wholeness. When the apostles saw Jesus after the resurrection, remember, he still had the scars from the crucifixion, and Thomas, wanted to touch them for proof. So we know the scars didn't go away. Even though he resurrected, he still carried the proof of the pain he went through. So Eric Butterworth tells us that it can be hard for us to relate to this 2,000-year-old story of Jesus' resurrection. So I want to share with you this one more recent story of resurrection. Thank you, God. That he shares in the chapter. It says, one young man returned from war without his legs. When the healing of the body had completed itself, he was still far from returning to civilian life. Something had died in him when he could never walk again. He lay in his hospital bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. He refused to talk to anyone who tried to help him. He refused to cooperate with the doctors and the nurses who were trying to help him make this great adjustment. And so one day, another of the patients in the hospital strolled in and sat down in a chair near his bed and took out a harmonica and started playing softly. And the patient looked at him and just for a second and then back at the ceiling, and that was all it was that day. Then the next day, the player came again. For several days, he continued to come and to play quietly. And one day he said, "Does my playing annoy you?" And the patient said, "No, I guess I like it." And he talked a little bit more each day. One day the harmonica player was in a really jovial mood, and he decided to play a sprightly tune and to do a little tap dance for this patient, his new friend. And the patient looked on, but he was apparently unimpressed with this exhibition. And the dancer said, "Hey, why don't you smile once in a while and let a guy know you're alive?" The dancer was smiling as he gave this gentle rebuke, and the amputee said, "I might as well be dead as in the fix that I'm in." "Okay," answered the happy one, "so you're dead, but you're not as dead as the fellow who was crucified 2,000 years ago, and he came out of it all right." And the patient said, "Oh, it's easy for you to preach, but if you were in my fix, you'd sing a different tune." With this, the dancer stood up and said, "I know a 2,000-year-old resurrection story is pretty far in the dim past. So maybe an up-to-date example will help you believe it can be done." And with that, he pulled up his trouser legs, and the boy in the bed looked, and he saw 2 artificial limbs. And his own resurrection began in that moment. So resurrection is always possible for us, no matter the condition. When we raise our eyes above the circumstances and remember the truth, the stone will be rolled away, and we will see things rightly rather than try to set them rightly. We will see with the consciousness of God. Are you ready for your resurrection? Yes? I can't hear you. Are you ready for your resurrection? Yes, yes. Affirm with me. For every crucifixion, there is a resurrection. For every crucifixion, there is a resurrection. I am resurrected to new life. And so it is. God bless you.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.